All right, so here we are, getting ready for another race with the Polaris RZR. This one in beginning of March. So the last one we did was kind of the beginning of February 10th. This one's gonna be March 3rd, 2nd or 3rd, one of those days. Anyway, so there's some stuff that I want to take care of that I think is an issue. Prioritizing, you know, there's obviously in running the car, there's things I want to change and maybe tweak and things like that. But you got to prioritize all that stuff. You know, my job is not only to run this vehicle. I have to do, you know, other things to make money and things like that. So running this is, you know, something I'm doing on my spare time. So working on it and all that, all is going to come, you know, when I'm not doing the other work that I'm doing. And that is just the reality of it. So I have to prioritize what I want to do. My number one priority, I've sat down and thought about it, is there is a noise and a vibration that has always come from this vehicle, from the front of it. And mainly when you go into all-wheel drive or out of all-wheel drive, it changes. So, you know, when I first got the vehicle, I did not realize there is, well, I knew there was a shaft, right, that goes from the, you know, like the all-wheel drive output unit here, and then goes all the way to the front diff. And it is a multi-piece prop shaft. And what it has on it, which I did not know until I did some research, is it has a carrier bearing on it. And so thinking about it, you know, at first when I got the vehicle and I felt the noise, I was like, well, maybe the fluid in the diff needs to be changed. So I changed that, didn't fix the problem. But now I believe that it is the carrier bearing. Is it worn out? Is it getting worn out? It's gotten worse, the noise, so I'm assuming it's worn out and I need to change the bearing out. So what I'm gonna do is lift the vehicle up. The way I understand it is you have to take pretty much the skid plate down, and I wanna say the center console, even though some people online were saying you don't have to take the center console out, but I'm gonna take it out because I have the service manual and it says to take it out. So I'm just gonna do it the way the service manual does it. There's a pin, like a roll pin. So I have a replacement roll pin, and there's an O-ring that it shows on the parts diagram. So I have those two replacement parts. I'm gonna take the shaft out, take the carrier bearing out, and I'm gonna inspect it and see what the deal is. And I have a replacement bearing. And from what I understand from reading online is there is an actual Toyota bearing that is the same bearing. So I got that part number and I got that bearing because the replacement bearing is like $80 and the Toyota bearing is like $25. So I have that bearing. I'm gonna swap it if I can do that. First I'm gonna inspect it, and then I'm going to see if that helps the noise. It hasn't, you know, the only other thing that I see is a problem is there's a part back here. I don't know if you can see, let me see if I can get a flashlight here. But it is the shaft, the telltale, I don't think from this side you can see it. You gotta go on the passenger side. My telltale here, so you can see, there's wear marks on the shaft there. So that, and there's like a little, like stamped steel cross member that goes across here that connects the two like frame rails, the tubes, and it's wearing on that. So my assumption is that the bearing has worn enough that the shaft is moving. Because what I have noticed as well is that it is determined, the noise changes with the suspension going up and down and cycling. So with the suspension cycling, that shaft, I wanna say moves. We're probably talking like millimeters. And I wanna say that it wears on that cross member there, and that's what's making those wear marks. And that's, because that's a metal on metal wear, right? So yeah, I think that that's what's it. And I think that that's why the noise gets worse and goes away. So I'm gonna try to change it and see what the deal is. The other things I would like to do, I would like to make a ride height adjustment. you know, there's some measurements that I have from the service manual that are the factory. I guess they have you measure the full shock length when it's fully drooped. There's also, I'm going to adjust the clicks. I have the factory settings for the clicks, because when I had the shocks rebuilt, the rear ones, they just kind of left them wide open, wide and soft. And I put them back in what I thought was the middle, but I don't think that is the middle. I'm going to adjust those back to factory. And because I get a little bit of bottoming out. And in the service manual, it says that bottoming out is okay because you have skid plates. I'd like to go maybe a little, like an inch and a half higher, maybe even 2 inches, just to give myself, because what I've noticed is everybody's radius rods sit with a little bit of down angle to them, and mine sit level. So, you know, I don't know. That's me just looking at other people's cars. But, you know, that's my further development I want to do with this car, just to get a little bit, you know, more height out of it. And then I also have these, oh, the other thing was, for the ride height, is I watched some shock therapy videos. And in the shock therapy videos, they have some measurements for different tire sizes of what your ride height should be. And I measured, and I'm not even close to those. Like, I still have like 2 inches on some of those. So that's another thing I'm going off of. The other thing that I would like to do is I bought these are shock therapy end links that I found on Facebook Marketplace for sale. These are for a Turbo S, which means they're 12mm bolts, and mine are 10mm bolts. So I either need to get the right spacers that go in these to fit in here, or I have to drill these out. And I'm kind of thinking I want to go spacer route so I don't change the bolt here. I don't know. I don't know what would be better. A part of me thinks it'd be better just to upgrade to 12mm bolt. And the only reason I want to change them is I have one end link over here that I think when my radius rod bent, it bent the end link. And it doesn't seem to have gotten any worse, but I don't want it to break in a race. So that's why I'm looking to change them. So I might, you know, we'll see. I might go to like CarTech, and I might see in Corona, off-road supply store, and I might see if I can buy the spacers. Shock Therapy quoted me like 80, like with shipping was like $100. It's a little, you know, from what I can see online, I could probably buy the spacers, but I don't know if they're gonna fit as well. Seems to be there's a little bit of, with the machining, there's a plus or minus with some of this stuff. Other than that, I want to check the valves on this, so I bought a valve cover gasket. I don't know if I'm going to get to that this time. Maybe for the next race. There is one more race. This is AMA, District 38. There's 2 races in March. There's one in April, and then there's a break. So I might do the one at the beginning of March. I'm going to skip the one at the end of March, maybe, and then do the one in April, and then take that break. Probably before that race in April. If I don't get to it now, I want to do the to adjust the valves, or check the valves at least. Other than that, yeah, that's it that I want to check out. And I want to go and I want to finish another race and just kind of knock that out. That's my goal. So that's what this video is about. Probably tie it into that video or make 2 videos out of it. But I'm going to go through this process of mainly we'll see, maybe the throwout bearing and the ride height adjustment, but we'll see. You know, keep watching if you want to see all that stuff and how it goes. All right, here we are. Got to so it's a little bit more complicated than the service manual. Service manual pretty much says take out the center console. There's the bearing, which it wasn't. So I don't know. I don't know if it's for, and the service manual is for this year, 2015, but for some reason, it's not as simple as they leave it out to be. So, as you can see, I've taken all the seats out, because that made it way easier. First, I took the 2 front seats out to get the center console out, and then I took down, you can see over here, I've got the 2, like the middle skid. This is the small front skid plate, and then this is the mid skid plate before the rear skid plate. And that allowed me to get under there and take a look. And I'm glad, see, this is why, you know, the way I've understood it, I'll say fairly new to off-road racing, like running an off-road race program where I'm doing multiple races. Most of the time in my off-road racing experience, we did one race a year, and that was the Bob 500. And, you know, so we had all year to get the car ready for the next race. So this is my first time running a vehicle at multiple races a year. And I always, you know, understood that guys would say, you've got to prep the car before every race. That prep is one of them, and there's businesses based on prep. So I understand why. I knew I got it, but like when you start to do it and you start to really understand it, and in going to look at the bearing, I noticed that one of, you know, the coolant line, which is these two lines here, run from the back where the engine is all the way up to the front where the radiator is. And there's these little clips that go along the chassis, and like 2 or 3 of mine had popped out. So the line was like rubbing on a piece of metal, which at some point, like with the off-road rate, you're only gonna be able to rub that for so long. So I'm glad I saw that, because I'm gonna put some chafe protection around it and then try to secure those into those clips better. In case they pop out again, at least that chafe protection will be there to, and it's like, you can kind of see the bracket down in here, which is exactly where the bearing is. That's like the bracket that the bearing bolts to. And I don't know if you can see this. The light is pretty dim here, but the bearing, when I'm under it, I can move that bearing a significant amount. So I think that's where it's coming from. And what I had to do is take the rear console out with the rear seats so I could get at the bolts, because the bolts are like right here and they come in from the top. So that's why I just took everything out. Plus I'm gonna clean everything, and I also have a blown fuse that I need to get to anyway. There's one thing I don't like, which I wanna change. I have the bench, when I bought it, it came with this bench rear seat. And the problem with that is it spans the console, and it like is so tightly fit that you can't, it's so hard to get out. So if you just wanna get to the battery, you know, you can't easily, and that you can't do it easily. And the stock seats are way easier for that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna try to get the stock seats that are the 2 separate seats, because that's just, for serviceability, I don't need the bench seat. There's nobody sitting in the middle. So I don't need that. So I wanna get that fixed, because I don't like the bench seat. For racing, for accessibility, for serviceability, all that stuff, I wanna make it very easy. So nice thing about this is I get to clean everything, because everything gets really dirty in here. So I'm gonna go over and do that before I put everything back in, and then I'm gonna get that bearing out. And once I get the bearing out, I'll kind of show you, because it'll probably be a little easier to understand. But it moves around a lot, so I'm gonna get that out, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so I got the bearing out. The trickiest part was the bolt. Let's see if you can see. The bolt, if you look, this bolt here, that you see the hole down there, it's right next to the coolant line. So that's a tricky one. I almost would rather the bolt go through the bottom and have the threads on top. I guess it's something I could do. I could take the captive nuts out of there and flip them, or put just a bolt and a nut. And then that way I can hold it at the top and tighten it from the bottom, but whatever. That's what it is. But, okay, so I got so when you take and you loosen it, then this end, this is the end that's coming from the, this is the, U-joint there that comes from this output shaft here. So I've got that off. And you can see there was definitely something, based on the wear marks here, rubbing on the chassis. I don't think the bearing was bad. I think the isolator was worn out. So this was just making it so that we'll say the suspension went up and down and that shaft moved, it was moving too much in the isolator. And I think that's what was causing the vibration, because the bearing itself you know, doesn't seem to be bad. So I think it was just moving a lot in the isolator, like I said. They make an upgraded one, which I probably should do, but for now, I don't have time. So I'm just gonna put a stock one back in. I'm going to, actually, I'm gonna get the stock one out and I'll show you that one. Or what is the Toyota part number one. So hold on one second. All right, so this here is Toyota part number. It's an HB31. And they claim online that it is a replacement. And it looks like they're not wrong. It's hard for me to tell. I guess, yeah, the bearing is right. Now, I guess the only thing, you know, or the way to really kind of see, yeah, it looks like it would work. So, now, what sucks about this, well, not what sucks, but, so the stock one you can't re-grease, but they make one, I think Super ATV makes one, that you can re-grease, and it has a Zerk fitting on it. Now, access to that is probably tricky, I guess, from the bottom if you put it on. But yeah, it's seems to be like it'd be a pretty tricky thing. You'd have to take the skid plate off all the time. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean this looks like it's gonna work. So we'll have to see. It looks, I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like it will fit. I just gotta press it on. So probably do that, and I'll go with that bearing and see what the deal is, and hopefully it works. Probably not gonna know if it works or not until I do the race, but if it goes on there, kind of works in a way. So yeah, stay tuned. So earlier in this video, I was very confused about how to, reading in the manual, how to get the shaft out and everything, and it seemed to be a little bit off. So, come to find out, I was reading the wrong section. I guess there's probably another model with a bearing that's a little farther forward, and so it was kind of confusing to me of why it was making sense like that. But I went a couple pages more, and it made more sense because it was then talking about what I have. So it does tell you to remove all the seats. It tells you to remove both front and rear center consoles, which obviously I did, as you see in the video. So yeah, going back, you know, we've got everything ready to go. Remove the bearing. They actually want you to remove the rubber isolator, and then knock the bearing off with, they say to pull it off with a 2-jaw puller. I just kind of used like a brass drift and a mallet and just knocked it off. Then they tell you to use a bearing installation sleeve, which pretty much is just a piece of tubing. You know, I don't know what material most of them are made out of. I tried to go get a piece of aluminum tubing that would work, but I could not find any. So I got a piece of DOM. That way it won't split. And I should work, I believe. It does fit right in there. And it does, and they tell you, you know, only to hit the race. And so mine, you can see here, you can push this on. It's actually pretty tight. All right, so I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video that it was kind of confusing about how they were telling me to take the carrier bearing out. That's because it was probably for a different model, and that was one that has a carrier bearing that's a little farther forward. I went a couple pages in the manual, and then I found my model, and so it made it much easier. You know, remove the seats, remove the front and rear center console. So I got all that out just as I showed you before. Now, I've got this Toyota bearing. They say to use installation and a bearing installation sleeve, which mine is, I've got a piece of DOM tubing that just contacts the race, and that's how I'm going to then slide it on here and install it onto the pretty much what is the kind of the bearing land, I guess, of this shaft, and we'll see if that works. It should work, no problem. We'll see. It's the Toyota bearing, so I'm gonna go with that and see how it works, and hopefully it works good. And then you have to install a little bit of Loctite 603, so sleeve retaining compound, which I'm assuming kind of holds it in place. And then I actually picked up, this is another topic altogether, but I picked up some two seats that I'm going to use the bases off of that bench seat, put them on here, and that way I have two independent rear seats now, and I won't have to take the whole seat out to get to like the battery fuse box or block and stuff like that. So yeah, gonna knock it out and see how it goes. Cleaned up my skid plates. Should be pretty good. I'm gonna vacuum everything out, get everything ready, and should be ready for the race this weekend. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so I tapped it, and it went on pretty good. That's it there. I believe it looks like it's all the way seated against this. There's like a little ridge back here where it kind of pops up against, and I believe that's it. And there it is. So it does fit. It went on pretty easily, which I'm happy about. It has, so the one big difference in this one over the stock one is it has these like seals, which I don't think you really need, because on this one it doesn't meet up the same way like the one on the Toyota would, but they're there anyway. And we'll see how that goes. See if it works, and hopefully we don't have a problem. I don't think we should, but you never know. All this information on the internet, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's actually legit or not, but we'll see. All right, so I got everything back in, shafts and everything. The trickiest part was, you put the rear shaft in first, and it goes in obviously pretty easily, but then the front one, like you have to slide it back so that it can onto the rear shaft, so that far enough so that it can then spline onto the front diff right there. And it was very tricky to get that lined up. And yeah, it got stuck. There's like a little metal ledge on the frame, and the front yoke kind of got stuck on it. So that was a little tricky, but got it on there, put the pin back in, and it should be good to go. And I got all the seats, everything back in, center console, put these bolted up to the bases that were on the bench seat. Weirdly though, the inserts on these were 1/4-20. I expected them to be metric, so that was kind of odd, but got all that back on, everything back in, skid plates back on, and it's ready to drop down and do a race now. So yeah, that's it. We'll see what happens in the race, how everything goes, and another 100 or so miles on this thing, and we'll figure out. I think one of the other things I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to factory settings with compression and rebound, the soft and hard settings on these. There's some factory kind of guidelines to set them at that kind of factory spec, so I'm going to do that and see how that goes. And then I greased up the yokes and everything, and yeah, we'll see.